Hey, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm doing a part three to a series about how chronic stress can impact the whole you from the inside out. Even if you are fit and you think you're healthy, but might not be healthy on the inside, because what we tend to do as high performers and endurance athletes or athletes in general, we tend to thrive on more is better. I always say less is more. Sometimes we need to make adjustments so we're not wearing ourselves out. What we want to review: hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal gland connection. So here's a great image watching the video. This is from my Nutritional Therapy Association. I am a certified nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner called FDN. And I correlate all that together with metabolism testing, with my training in Czech Institute Holistic Lifestyle Training, NASM certified personal trainer, triathlon coach, all the above I've done for a long time. Combine all that together into what I call the holistic method. But what we learn here in nutritional therapy is one area I started going into after I got adrenal exhaustion, air quotes, is not a correct term. When I fell apart in 2013, I was doing Ironmans 2001 until 2013, March 2013. Something went wrong. Oops, Siri. Try again. I'm not talking to you, Siri. Siri's my phone. Must have said the word. All right. So I was doing Ironmans, 50K trail runs, marathons, and I was doing pretty well for my age group as an athlete. But what I'm trying to share in a series of interviews and videos, going down back in time, going through a lot of the red flags I ignored. I thought I was thriving and kicking butt as an athlete and a business owner and as a female. And a lot of things that happened to me, if we go back to this HP axis dysfunction, cortisol dysregulation, I didn't know something was wrong with me until I was way over here on the far right. I didn't collapse, failed adaptation, but I was beginning of that phase. And I wrote a book, Life is Not a Race, It is a Journey, to share how did I get to this place? How did I get to not being able to do anything after I just did my best race in 70.3 triathlon worlds, my best Ironman Hawaii time, best marathon times? I was on the peak of my career. And months later, 6 months later, I remember June 2013, I gained 30 pounds without changing much. I had to stop exercising, but I wasn't eating much. I was low carb, keto, as I would say, probably too much, doing too much fasted exercise, that I caused a lot of this distress from the way I was living life. But it's a combination of that beaker of stress that accumulates, external stressors that are chronic, and these hidden sources of chronic stress that start to accumulate, probably because the external stressors were too much and led to this path of dysfunction. So if we go to the definitions of HP access, if we look at on what we learned as nutritional therapy practitioners, the hypothalamus and the pituitary are the size of an almond and are located the base of the brain, along with the adrenals, which are two walnut-sized glands that sit on top of the kidneys, which is why they're called which means above, renal, kidney, adrenals. The pituitary and hypothalamus are known to help respond to stress, right? So these little glands also influence other physiological functions that we don't usually associate with stress. What are those? Well, we talk about this as nutritional therapy practitioners as foundations: mineral balance, blood pressure, steroid hormones or sex hormones, blood sugar balance, tissue, appetite, sleep, memory, and cardiac function. Possible symptoms that you might want to pay attention to for HPA axis dysfunction: exhaustion and fatigue, difficulty falling asleep, struggling upon waking up, dependency on substances as caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, any stimulants, brain fog, dizziness, nauseousness, low appetite, low blood pressure, increased sugar, salt cravings, unexplained weight loss, unexplained hair loss. So there's so many different aspects related to HPA axis dysfunction. So it's hard to figure out what happened first. Now, what we want to look at in root cause medicine are the causes. What are causing or contributing to miscommunication between these three glands: hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal. Remember, the hypothalamus talks to pituitary gland, but also talks to the thyroid gland, as well as HP to the gonads. So our sex hormones get disrupted. What happens and how do we support rebalance? That's what we look at bioindividuality. We all respond differently to the same stressors. So my concern when I first had issues in 2013 and struggled for a few years trying to figure out, why me? Why do I have friends that continue to race 2 Ironmans a year and they're not struggling with adrenal issues? Why did I get a parasite, blastohominus, from, I assume, swimming in 70.3 Worlds, which was in Vegas, in fully disgusting, dirty water that no one was allowed to swim in except for that race day? Why me? That's why I dug into becoming the practitioner that I wanted to have as a high performer, instead of seeing different people that didn't understand an athlete's perspective, that it wasn't because I was eating too much crap. I wasn't sedentary sitting on the sofa. I was the opposite. So it's the other side of that bell curve when we find that Goldilocks effect to create the benefits of exercise and nutrition and movement and all that stuff. But if we're doing it too much, we're having that chronic stress leading to this HPA axis dysfunction, aggression of being compensatory phase, that we're having low cortisol and low hormones. I put this in a blog I touched on last time, and I put the video links of my story that I've done over the past 10 years. But looking at high cortisol, low cortisol, we want to test not just with the Dutch test. Someone was asking me about the Dutch test, and you can learn more about my approach as an FDN practitioner and a nutritional therapy practitioner. We need to look at the whole picture. I found a lot of functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, were doing functional lab testing, but they were still just treating the lab test results, which is what we don't want to do in our world as FDN practitioners. We want to collect clues. We're collecting clues to look at the whole picture and put the missing pieces of your health puzzle back together. And remember, you want to do this in advance before you have total destruction way over here on the far right. We want to get awareness of when I have that trending towards the right going on, that I can catch the red flags early on so I'm not causing full dysfunction. Now, we want to look at a holistic approach and look at multiple labs, not just a saliva or a Dutch urine, is a dried urine test, because we got to look at what other internal sources of chronic stress are contributing to our hormone dysfunction. So more about the female athlete might be a little different than the male athlete, but why does chronic stress impact weight gain, insulin resistance, immune dysfunction, parasites, sleep? I'm sharing and being full disclosure, sharing everything because I want to avoid what happened to me, because I'm not racing anymore. I would like to, but I choose not to because I just don't feel good running and I don't have that power and speed. And when someone tells me, oh, that's because you're getting older, that is a bunch of BS, because I have friends that are 60, 70, 80 years old still kicking butt doing races. So again, we want to individualize everything. Why do we get weight gain? Weight gain and insulin resistance, how is that related to chronic stress? So chronic stress can elevate cortisol levels, which directly affects metabolism, your fat storage, and insulin sensitivity. Increased cortisol is a result of chronic stress because cortisol prepares us for fight or flight response, fight, flight, or freeze. While this is beneficial for acute stress, chronic stress results in prolonged elevated cortisol, which can promote fat storage, especially around the abdominal. This type of visceral fat is associated with metabolic issues and increased risk of cardiovascular disease. We have blood sugar dysregulation. I talk about this all the time. Every stress response is a blood sugar response. Cortisol increases your blood sugar levels to provide that quick energy for the body to deal with that stress at hand. But when cortisol is constantly elevated, because we're always activating that system, just as high blood sugar and insulin resistance, same thing, high cortisol all the time leads to elevated glucose and over time insulin resistance because of the stress, not because you're eating ice cream every day or candy. Cortisol is constantly elevated, leads to insulin resistance, where the body's cells become less responsive to insulin. This means more glucose remains in the bloodstream, which eventually contributes to fat storage and can lead to prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. This is why when I do metabolism testing, we're measuring how much fat and carbohydrate you're burning at rest and during various exercise intensities. I also want to correlate that test result with your blood chemistry panel and ideally a Dutch hormone panel and your gut microbiome test and look at all these clues together. If you're metabolically healthy, we want to look at other markers besides your fat to carb burn, but this is a big clue of pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. It could be because of stress. Chronic stress impacts that blood sugar. Chronic stress also triggers cravings for high sugar and high fat foods when the body seeks sources of energy. Over time, this contributes to weight gain, especially if combined with insulin sensitivity. Now, you might find yourself overeating. I didn't feel I was overeating at all, and that wasn't my issue, but I just felt that I got headaches from a lot of food. So I felt that I was insulin resistant. I couldn't eat fruit. I couldn't eat any. I was doing apples and almond butter a lot at the time and berries, and I stopped doing fruit for years because it would just make me feel dizzy, headache right away. Now, these metabolic changes that I experienced during the last 5-10 years correlate with my HP axis dysfunction, but how it's a whole domino effect, right? And I had this 30-pound extra weight, even though I was an athlete and I was lean and strong. I didn't think so at the time, but I look back and appreciate what you have after you don't have it anymore. And difficulty maintaining that body composition. My body, I assume, was in a catabolic breakdown state with my low DHA hormones and cortisol being elevated and then lowered, that I lost a lot of muscle and gained a lot of fat. Now, immune dysfunction, you might find yourself with chronic stress being more vulnerable to getting infections and pathogens, parasites, just overall illness is more frequent. So elevated cortisol suppresses your immune function by reducing the production of immune cells, and this dampens your inflammatory response, which is needed to fight infections. This is going to lead to more increased vulnerability to getting those viruses, bacteria, and parasites, which I had different ones. H. pylori was always elevated, and I had a parasite, blastohominus, and then a different parasite when I retested. So it's good to test, stool test. I think every 6 months would be great. Test and not guess. You don't know what you don't know, especially what's going on under the hood that are contributing to that overflow of your beaker of stress. Now, over time, chronic stress can lead to a low-grade chronic inflammation, which can further dampen or weaken your immune response. So having a prolonged inflammatory state contributes to the development of other conditions as autoimmune issues and increases your risk for chronic diseases. What started first? Was it because of the stressful lifestyle you're leading, athlete or not, fill in the blank? You just burn the candle at both ends. And in time, you start to have all these different random, you think, health issues. Now, what is the deal with our gut health and stress? Stress definitely impacts your gut health. It weakens your gut barrier. And when we have less defense, less guards around our castle, we have a weakened gut barrier. We're more susceptible to allow harmful enemies getting through the barriers of our castle, allowing for harmful pathogens as parasites to thrive. They can get in the bypass as the stomach organ, the stomach acid is not acidic enough. So we don't have that first line of defense available. So I like to share what happened to me as I got parasite infection. And then I looked at HTMA, hair mineral analysis test, and looking at food sensitivity tests, and really looking at all these different sources of hidden stress that I could not repair until I changed the way I live life. You can't get as much success on a parasite protocol, whatever we figure out based on the functional lab tests, unless you work on your lifestyle, your stress management, your sleep hygiene routine, how you're exercising. We need to usually tailor it down. And happiness, gratitude, play, laughter. Bring yourself into balance of your nervous system, that heart rate variability, getting out of sympathetic dominance, getting stuck in fight or flight is often what happens. Now, chronic stress impacts the gut health, but also we have that gut-brain connection we've talked about with the vagus nerve. This can cause disruptions in your gut function and your microbiome balance with chronic stress. So high cortisol compromise the integrity of the gut lining. That gut wall lining is very sensitive, delicate, one cell thick. And when we damage that mucosal barrier, irritate the gut wall lining, we get more that cheesecloth gut wall lining, as Dr. Tom O'Brien talks about in his books, leaky gut. And then we have undigested food particles. Instead of that sealed gut wall lining, now we have gaps in our gut wall lining, and food gets through that cheesecloth that we're not supposed to. So we get cheesecloth is more damaged, and we get undigested food particles, toxins, and pathogens passing through this intestinal barrier outside of that gut into the bloodstream. This increases our risk for systemic inflammation, which you don't often relate that all these problems systemically in my joints, in my skin, and showing up in different forms are coming back to the root cause is of your gut health. Now, we want to pay attention to that systemic inflammation. That's with the functional labs, look at your CRP, inflammatory markers. But why is your immune system activated? This is going to make it harder for your body to defend against infections if we don't figure out what's causing it. So we can stop putting gasoline on that fire and continue to have more and more problems by doing anti-parasite protocol without figuring out what else is going on that's causing that dysfunction in gut, because you probably just get more stressors coming in, more pathogens, more microbiome imbalances. Stress disrupts the balance of the beneficial gut bacteria, which plays a crucial role in your immune function, your digestion, and of course, we're talking about the gut-brain connection is that mental health and your neurotransmitter production. Those are made in your gut, and we have to have proper neurotransmitters or serotonin, feel good. A stress gut is more vulnerable to infections like parasites, candida, overgrowth, bacteria imbalances. I did have candida as well as showing up on my labs. I didn't have a lot of symptoms, but they can be far removed. All right, so I explained my challenges with the gut health, with parasites, my immune system, my weight gain, my stress of overtraining. Then there's that sleep. Why do we have that middle of the night, wake up at 2 in the morning and you're staring at the ceiling? Chronic stress interrupts your sleep patterns. And if you listen to all the research podcasts and articles on sleep and insulin resistant sleep and cortisol, appetite. There's a lot to it. That's why I prioritize my sleep. Cortisol should follow a natural rhythm, being highest in the morning when you wake up and the lowest at night as melatonin rises at night. So we want to see this cortisol to melatonin rhythm. If you have chronic stress, cortisol levels may be elevated at night and cortisol is maybe high. So we want to look at, or the cortisol is high at night and your melatonin's low. And so that's going to lead, obviously, to difficult time falling asleep or staying asleep. And then there's other patterns of waking up frequently or waking up in Chinese clock, the liver time is at 2 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if your liver is really activated, releasing glucose, you're dealing with detoxing, maybe there's parasites more active in the middle of the night. So there's that good analogy of, or correlation of looking at the Chinese clock and looking at 2 a.m. is that liver time. So it's always interesting to me to see that pattern. Now, a lack of restful sleep is the worst, right? I hate waking up and feeling exhausted. It kind of ruins my day. So, a lack of restful sleep worsens stress levels, creating a feedback loop where poor sleep increases cortisol production. Elevated cortisol disrupts sleep even more. And then you wake up and you have your coffee, you're increasing that cortisol again. So, that's why it's suggested to wait that cortisol awakening response about 90 minutes after you wake up to have your coffee, because caffeine is a stimulant and you don't want to increase your cortisol. Then I was wondering, I already have lower cortisol, so maybe it's okay to have my coffee in the morning because I'm already low cortisol. Now, we want to look at the sleep and cortisol connection with accelerated weight gain, metabolic health issues, emotional stress, really a big part of how you're feeling. And that's why I prioritize my sleep. Now, what's with anxiety, the depression, and brain fog, as chronic stress impacts our emotional health? So, elevated cortisol levels impact your brain function, leading to difficulty concentrating, memory issues, brain fog. So, over time, chronic stress can even damage the hippocampus, the area of the brain responsible for learning and memory. Long-term stress can lead to changes in the neurotransmitter balance, contributing to anxiety and depression. Chronic cortisol elevation lowers, we were just talking about this, serotonin levels, which are the feel-good hormone, leading to mood swings, irritability, and a sense of overwhelm. Then we have our hormonal imbalances. This is where I'm curious. When I started to have my health problems, I was 42 years old. That's also thought about perimenopausal age, when it starts 10 years or so before we hit that one day in time menopause. So women, chronic stress can maybe impact us even more than men, in my opinion, because we have this delicate balance of reproductive hormones leading to issues as irregular cycles, PMS, menopausal symptoms. But the balance between estrogen and progesterone, when cortisol is prioritized to respond to stress, it can imbalance our progesterone, leading to estrogen dominance. You might have symptoms as weight gain, bloating, and mood swings with our hormones imbalance. Perimenopause, menopause symptoms, chronic stress is what we talk a lot about in the perimenopause world, that we're already under a lot of stress with our hormones changing and lower estrogen, progesterone. That is kind of why, short sprint intervals, as Stacey Sims talks about, because instead of doing that stressful type of workouts, we just want that acute stress of a 10, 20, 30-second sprint interval, come back down to zone one for 2 minutes and come back to that sprint. That's not a stress, that's acute stress. But if we're doing a zone 4 workout or zone 3 for an hour that a lot of people do in a fitness studio, that is contributing to your beaker of stress. So my journey has been ongoing, and I continue my education. Next year, I want to do a menopause health specialist, metabolic health certification. I did genetics this year with Wild Health Precision Medicine. But really, it's ongoing to help you be your best self. I am trying to incorporate everything together in a holistic approach. That healing protocols are helpful. But I'm really learning that so many people have poor liver, gallbladder, bile function, and we need to work on foundations first that we learn in nutritional therapy, make sure everything works first before we can resolve your metabolic chaos. As I said, you can take all these supplements you're doing for different protocols or take a supplement for what you're low in a functional lab test, but that doesn't solve the why. Why are you having imbalances? If you stop, pause, and reset, reflect at how you're living life, we need to address that almost first. Now, signs and symptoms, the high cortisol we can go into, but go into this nutritional therapy article, you can see all the research links, but how the symptoms of HP axis dysfunction. You can learn more about seminar we have for looking at hormone dysfunction. What we want to look at is early on when you are in that HPA progression, your cortisol is higher than optimal. What are those signs and symptoms? Weight gain, high cortisol promotes fat storage, visceral fat. Cortisol can cause muscle breakdown. Your catabolic increases blood sugar levels, leading to muscle wasting. High cortisol elevates your blood sugar, leading to insulin resistance over time, may result in type 2 diabetes or difficulty managing blood glucose. Cortisol can increase blood pressure by retaining sodium and affect blood vessel tone. Fatigue, many people feel exhausted, have trouble sleeping due to cortisol-induced hyperactivity, so you're tired but wired. High cortisol disrupts your natural circadian rhythm, difficult to fall asleep, and difficulty staying asleep and waking up feeling rested. Cortisol affects your neurotransmitter balance, increase anxiety, irritability, depression. It lowers your immune system, making more susceptible to infections and slower recovery. Chronic stress can lead to gut dysbiosis, IBS, leaky gut. Cortisol's impact on our gut wall lining. Frequent illness, you might get more colds, more flu, infections, thinning skin, poor wound healing. Cortisol can reduce collagen production, leading to skin issues and slower recovery of injuries. Disrupt your hormone balance, high carb, sugary food. So I like to share this video how I thought I was doing all the right things. We talk about burning fat, increasing metabolic flexibility, but the chronic stress needed to be resolved. What are signs and symptoms of low cortisol if you continue living life as a race for too long? Chronic fatigue, you have low blood pressure, low blood sugar, weight loss, difficulty maintaining weight. Mine was gaining weight first. Low mood, depression, brain fog, salt cravings because aldosterone's in the adrenal glands. That's related to sodium balance. So if you have low cortisol, you might have need for more salt, crave salt, right? Struggle to maintain that sodium potassium balance. More sensitivity stress, small stressors, you might feel this, you get triggered really easily. Why is that? High cortisol and low cortisol suppress immune system, leading to frequent illnesses. Low cortisol can slow digestion, leading to bloating, constipation, reduce enzyme production, worsening gut health. So you can take all those digestive enzyme supplements I suggest to clients, but we still need to work on breathing, strengthening that vagal nerve, getting heart rate variability testing daily. Biofeedback can help you figure out what works for me to de-stress, shift more parasympathetic, be more resilient. How is cortisol, HPA axis dysfunction related to thyroid issues? Huge part that I'd like to share with people. Even though I'm taking a thyroid supplement, T3, high cortisol reduces conversion of inactive T4 to active T3. This can lead to symptoms of low thyroid. And we want to look at thyroid hormone resistance, as chronic cortisol exposure can cause cells to be less sensitive to thyroid hormones, contributing to low thyroid function symptoms. Suppressed thyroid stimulating hormone. Prolonged high cortisol suppresses pituitary gland's release of thyroid stimulating hormone, reducing thyroid hormone production and leading to sluggish metabolism, fatigue, and weight gain. Chronic stress can trigger or exacerbate the autoimmune conditions as Hashimoto's, where immune system attacks the thyroid. So you get thyroid autoimmunity. if you're taking thyroid medication, you're not seeing any changes, you may want to look at why is your thyroid low. Maybe it's just not eating more protein, digesting your protein to get the amino acid tyrosine to make part of that thyroid hormone, T3, and getting your iodine. That might help, but we still need to address why is the thyroid low? Conversion in the liver, conversion in the gut, poor gut function, poor liver congestion, but chronic stress impacts thyroid. Gut health, we talked about. High cortisol weakens that gut lining, allowing toxins, pathogens, undigested food particles to pass into the bloodstream, triggering inflammation. Cortisol disrupts the balance of gut bacteria, favoring harmful bacteria over beneficial microbes, leading to dysbiosis, so imbalance of your good and bad bacteria. And this can contribute to digestion issues, inflammation, immune dysfunction. Lower cortisol reduces your gastric motility and stomach acid production, leading to constipation, bloating, and indigestion. How many people have that? Everybody I talk to has indigestion, bloating, or constipation, or some type of gut issues. Could be low stomach acid, but why is your stomach acid low? Increase of infections, chronic stress, as we said, weakens the gut barrier, leaky gut, allowing for infections of parasites, candida, overgrowth to take hold more easily. So we're more susceptible. And I think that's more, I always think of it, the top, work your way north. First, start top, work your way down. Get in that parasympathetic state before you eat. Make sure your stomach acid is in that right range, 1.5 to 3.0 pH scale is what I used to learn. Make sure we're able to wash away in that acidic stomach, wash those bad guys. We want all the guards to be on duty. Now, a big area I've been fascinated over the years and love to continue learning more is the role of mitochondria in stress and the cell danger response. Mitochondria dysfunction, chronic cortisol exposure, can cause damaged mitochondria, reducing their ability to produce ATP. This leads to fatigue, poor muscle performance, slow recovery from exercise. Not so good. Elevated cortisol increases oxidative stress within the mitochondria. This accelerates cellular aging and reduces efficiency of energy production. Mitochondria become less efficient with converting nutrients into usable energy, leading to chronic fatigue, brain fog, and slower metabolism. So when I do my Pinoy metabolism testing, we're measuring your fat to carb burn. That's really a measurement of how healthy are your mitochondria at rest and during exercise, various intensities, right? So if our chronic stress are impacting our cellular level, our health at a cellular level, we want to work on where is this coming from? Why? Oxidative stress, we already increase. If we're doing a lot of exercise, that is increasing. If you're doing a lot of high intensity, hard workouts, you're increasing the oxidative stress when you're more glycogen burning exercise. So we want to look at what's going on. Why is my metabolism slowing down? That's what I also test when I do Pinoy metabolism testing. Where how fast or slow is your metabolism? How can you improve it? But if cortisol is a big part of regulating your metabolism as thyroid, any dysregulation here is going to impact your metabolic function. Why? High cortisol promotes fat storage around the abdominal visceral fat. This increases your risk for metabolic syndrome, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. Cortisol increases muscle protein breakdown, catabolism. So we've learned a lot. I've been talking about muscle health and being catabolic state, that's slowing your metabolism. So we get more anabolic resistant. Well, if you're having chronic stress, as well as females, we get older, we're more anabolically resistant. We need to really work hard to not be muscle wasting, and that will lead to slower metabolism. Again, prolonged high cortisol can cause insulin resistance, where your body becomes less responsive to insulin. This is why we probably can't tolerate as many carbohydrates. You have to place the carbs in around that harder workout session. When you're post-workout, your muscles have that GLUT4 transporter. I was just listening to something with lactate is involved in there too, to get the GLUT4 transporter elevated so we can shuttle that glucose into the muscle cell without the need for insulin. And when post-workout, we're more sensitive, insulin sensitive too. Now, elevated blood sugar, increased fat storage, that obviously would contribute to weight gain, metabolic dysfunction. And then we have low cortisol can cause slower metabolism processes, leading to fatigue, lower energy, weight loss resistance, and decreasing overall vitality. Everything's just sluggish, slower. We don't want that. And then we can talk more about your sleep. But basically, high cortisol is linked to weight gain, sleep issues, mood issues, insulin resistance, lower immune system function, and gut dysfunction. Continue on that way of life, you get to the next stage where you have low cortisol leading to fatigue, low blood pressure, hypoglycemia, salt cravings, depression, immune weakness. Chronic cortisol dysregulation disrupts your thyroid function, gut health, mitochondria, energy production, metabolism, sleep, and that all contributes to a wide impact of all your body systems. Another video I did, you can click on the link here, my story, my background with adrenal fatigue, recognizing the problem. You know, I didn't really have an option. It's just you can't ignore it after a certain time. And how my life changed is another video. And how I've worked towards stopping the racing mentality, towards more self-care, recovery, balance, again, moving, changing my life, reduce the intensity of my training and time the workouts, more yoga, walking. I had to focus on more nutrient density, digesting my food, taking digest enzymes, having apple cider vinegar and lemon in my water. At first, I had to do no coffee for the first year because that was taxing my adrenals. Focus on more hydration and electrolytes, having adaptogens, magnesium, B vitamins were really important. Functional lab testing, really work on that for a bio-individual approach. And then balancing stress with the rest of the holistic method and focusing on the sleep-wake cycles, you know, having sunlight in the morning, winding down the evening, having our little routine that'll do the sauna and walk, do sauna, do stretching routine, wear my blue blockers if I'm watching TV, and taking time to journal at night and read in bed in a cold, dark room, wearing my eye mask. So that's a little bit about me, but really lessons learned. Listen to your body. Don't ignore those signs of overtraining, stress, burnout. Balance is a key. Figure out what works for you is different for me. How adrenals is not the right word to use, but chronic stress impacts everything, not just your energy, but sleep, your digestion, your immune system, metabolism, overall well-being. So when I do metabolism testing, I'm not just looking at that data. I'm doing a full intake form on my nutritional therapy, using the whole practice, looking at red flags that you might not be seeing correlating to your metabolism test results. Life is not a race, it's a journey that we want to look at. Life is a journey. I want to thrive as I get older and improve how I'm going to age. I didn't think of that 10 years ago, but now after age 50, it's more looking at my parents at age 80, what happens as they age and how they look and how they move and feel, and losing my dad to a lot of issues that were really controllable if doctors would pay attention to them and work at connecting the dots rather than treating symptoms. So that's fired me up in my passion, how we help you be your best self as you age. So I'm becoming that coach that I wanted to have. Endurance athletes or high performers or anyone that's really a health optimizer, that you don't have to be an athlete to work with me. Most of my clients are not. They're just struggling trying to get results or trying to figure out their red flags. So you can read and watch the videos. I've got tons of information in there. But, you know, remember all these different signs and symptoms of dysfunction. There's several markers. There are 24 different markers on here that you can look at this blog I found online, but you know what you can do about it. Seek therapy, speak to your doctor, which you need to know someone that actually understands this area. exercise the right kind, avoid stimulants. You know, there's so many options, but look at that. You know, what happens? We have this chronic stress activating alarm system to high cortisol, the other end to burnout, exhaustion, low cortisol, and how it's kind of controversial how you call it. It's not adrenal burnout, it's just burning out in body systems, metabolic chaos. Looking at thyroid issues, menstrual reproductive dysfunction, infections. We talked about all this already, headaches, migraines, sleep, anxiety, gaining weight, you know, you're sick a lot. There's so much to look at. So this is a good chart for practitioners, but just not treating the symptoms, but work on the whole you and really look at this whole support system and how we want to look at the body works together, not just taking all these supplements. You have to change the way you're living life each day. If you have questions, would like a discovery call with me, just let me know. This is what I do, and this is my passion and my purpose and my mission to help you avoid going through all this metabolic chaos. wpotts.net. Let's talk soon. Thanks for listening.